First of all, thank you all for being here, in the morning on a Sunday and making this Jaipur Literature Festival one of the most successful festivals we've ever had. I'd just like to request everyone to keep the aisles empty. People walking in, please find places to sit or move to either sides. And help us keep this festival clean like you have till now. Please do check out the bazaar, by the way. There's some exquisite items of clothing and bags and other things that you can buy. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, namaskar, adab. Welcome to the 16th edition of the Jaipur Literature Festival, protected by Dettol Banega Swasth India at Bank of Baroda, Charbagh. We are delighted to introduce The Art of Bitfulness, Keeping Calm in the Digital World. This session is presented by the Bank of Baroda. I'd like to invite Shri Sudhanshu Sekhar Khamari ji, who's the DGM and Deputy Zonal Head of Jaipur Zone Bank of Baroda, to come up and say a few words.
Thank you, Asaja. Good morning, everyone. And as you know, this session is being partnered by Bank of Baroda. Bank of Baroda has a long-standing commitment to support education and literacy in India. One of the ways bank has supported education is through partnership with the Jaipur Literature Festival. JLFD is one of the largest literature festival in the world and brings together writers, poets, thinkers from around the globe to celebrate the written word. Bank has been a sponsor of JLF for several years and has played a key role in supporting festival efforts to promote literacy and education. The bank has helped to fund various events and activities at the festival, including author talks, panels, discussions, and workshops. These events provide a platform for authors and experts to share their knowledge, ideate, and insights on a wide range of topics related to literature, education, and written words. In addition to its partnership with JLF, Bank of Baroda also supports education and literacy through its various CSR activities. As you know, the day before yesterday, our MD sir has declared, in association with JLF, one literary award, that is Bank of Baroda Rashtrabhasha Samman, is we are launching, and for that actually it carries the highest literary award amount in Hindi. So a total amount of 61 lakh will be given in that, and any literature, any book that is translated into Hindi that year, it will qualify for that award. So in that 6 books will be shortlisted by the jury, and the first book that will be awarded, that the original writer from the regional language, he or she will get 21 lakh, and the translator into Hindi, he will get 15 lakhs. And for another 5 books, the original regional regional language writer, he will get 3 lakhs, and the translator will get 2 lakhs for that 5 other books. In conclusion, Bank of Baroda has a strong commitment to support education and literacy in India through its partnership such as JLF and such various CSR activities. Without taking much time, let me introduce the session and the renowned panelists. I am extremely happy to unleash today's session on the art of bitfulness, keeping calm in the digital world. We are excited to have technology-friendly writers, Mr. Nandan Nilekani and Tanuj Bhojwani with us today. They have written a compelling book that delves into secret of using electronic devices for our benefit without losing either mental peace or physical fitness. The book explores the information flow of what inundates our screens and how it can be controlled in a way that becomes a key to success in a mindful bit sort of way. The authors will be in conversation with Mr. Anirudh Suri, discussing their insights and experiences on harnessing important topics and learn how to master the digital world, not abandon it. Let me welcome Mr. Nandan Nilekani, Mr. Tanuj Bhojwani, and Mr. Anirudh Suri on stage. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you to Khamari sir and Bank of Baroda. Nandan Nilekani is the co-founder and chairman of Infosys Technologies Limited. He won the Economist Social and Economic Innovation Award for his leadership for India's unique identification initiative, which is better known as Aadhaar. In 2017, he received the Lifetime Achievement Award from EY. He is the author of Imagining India and co-authored The Art of Bitfulness, Keeping Calm in the Digital World. Tanuj Bhojwani is a storyteller who codes. His training in the sciences and humanities allows him to craft narratives about technology that are accessible without sacrificing technical depth. He is a former fellow at iSpert Foundation. Bhojwani works on policy issues related to digital identity, payments, data protection, and drones. Last but not the least, our moderator for today, Mr. Anirudh Suri's critically acclaimed book, The Great Tech Game, provides a big picture view of this vital question of our times. He continues to explore India's place in this new world order through his work as a technology venture capitalist and a non-resident scholar at Carnegie, India. Over to you, sir.
No, thank you so much, and good morning to all of you. It's a delight to be here with Mr. Nilekani and Tanuj, co-authors of the book, The Art of Bitfulness. Let me first start by saying, Mr. Nilekani, you've been an inspiration to, I think, many of us in our generation, and I think Tanuj and I can vouch for that there have been few people in the public domain who've managed to traverse the private sector as an entrepreneur. You've been at the forefront of the IT services revolution that has transformed India over the last 3-4 decades. And then more recently in the last decade in the public domain, having heralded the revolution that UPI, Aadhaar, and the India stack broadly has started off. And I think that journey is obviously going to play out a lot more over the next 2-3 decades. But so thank you, sir, for that. I think setting that example for so many of us who often try to bridge the public-private domain, but don't find it as easy as at least you make it seem. So given we have limited time today, the plan, I'll just give you all in the audience a quick plan of what we're going to do. We're going to start off obviously talking about the book, The Art of Bitfulness, which looks at a very important question of the individual's relationship with technology. But then we'll also quickly move into part 2 and part 3 of the discussion, which will look at how our society is interacting with technology and how technology is shaping our society. And lastly, we'll talk about how our nation, India, is being shaped by technology and our relationship with technology going forward. So let me first start off, Tanuj and Mr. Nilekani, on this piece of the individual and the technology. What's your, some of the key takeaways from the book on how the individual is being shaped, both in terms of values, behavior, time spent, etc.? What are some of the key takeaways that you'd like to share? And also how your own thinking evolved from the time when you maybe thought of the book to by the time you published the book.
Sure. Thank you very much, Anirudh. And This book essentially came out of the pandemic. I think in the pandemic, we found that we were spending more and more time on our digital devices. We were working from home. We were getting entertainment from home. We were ordering food on the device. We were buying things on the device. We were having relationships on the device. So everything was becoming more and more digital. And we also found that more and more people were getting actually completely, their lives were getting upset. They were getting a lot of negative news. They were getting depressed. They were doom scrolling and reading about when is the next vaccine coming or not coming or whatever. And both of us are in Bangalore, and we used to go for walks together. And we thought that maybe it's worthwhile trying to put out something about how to live with technology. Because technology today, especially because it is advertising driven, is designed to make you more and more engaged with the technology, and therefore you end up spending more and more time. And the best way to engage you is by appealing to your emotions, and that's why we have all this polarization and so on. So we thought that just like we have other things about how we deal with our lives, how to deal with today's consumer technology we thought was very important. And so the book is really about how to live with this technology, how to be on top of it rather than let the technology dominate you. And of course, given that we have an interest in policy, the second half of the book is about policy and how can we build better infrastructure than winner-take-all models for business.
And Tanuj, if I may just add on a specific question, which is, as I was reading the book, you talk about the relationship individuals had with technology that was intended to be one of a trusted sidekick. I like that term. It was intended to be a trusted sidekick, but somehow it has become both a codependent, but more dangerously a toxic relationship.
I think that metaphor was one of those things that, we, like you said, how did your thinking evolve around the book is that I think if you don't talk about this matter, what happens is you believe somebody else is doing it better. So I think Nandan used to look at me as somebody younger, and therefore I must have like a more manageable relationship. And I used to think the same about like 21-year-olds or younger. But what we did discover during the writing and the research with talking to people is that everybody is frustrated, and Gen Z more than ever. And a lot of them just sort of had this idea of taking breaks and just like getting off social media for a while. And it was commonly understood that this is happening. People would get very concerned, but when you tell them I'm just taking a break, it's become common sort of in their culture to do that. One thing we want to emphasize is therefore when Nandan and I went on those walks and we were talking about how we deal with technology, we realized that the methods are similar even if the particular tools, software, whatever are different. And he's obviously been doing this for many years, how he manages information, how he retrieves information at when he actually needs it, irrespective of whether you had smartphones or not, this OS, that OS, this app, that app, right? So we try to collect that timeless sort of wisdom, and therefore the book says this is how to live with your technology, not how to live without your technology. This is not about disconnect or preaching that you don't need these phones, etc. I think we all need them. We all need them for specific things. But what ends up happening is that it's a toxic relationship, like you said, it's a dependency, and we use them even when we don't need them. So trying to walk that line is what we have in the book.
So for some of you who might have been at the discussion yesterday that we were having around the morality of technology and how technology is changing our values, you might remember that I talked about tech optimists, tech pessimists, and tech realists in the middle between the optimists and pessimists. So let me quickly ask both of you. My own hypothesis, both of you are tech optimists. But of course, the book, I think, comes from a very realist standpoint, saying that we don't believe that technology has to be given this free rein, but you really have to think hard about how to manage that relationship because you don't want to avoid, right? That frustration must not lead to this idea that you're going to avoid technology, right? So am I right that you're both tech optimists or
absolutely.
tech realists?
I'm not only a tech optimist, I've spent most of my life actually using tech to make a difference. But I think the part of tech which I'm hugely optimistic about are how to use this digital transformation to improve societies, to give better services, to create a better quality of life for people, to help them meet their aspirations. But the point is that while we do that, we also get into this model of using things which are designed to captivate you, and then you use them in excessive ways, and they have a negative impact on your behavior. So I think we are really trying to say, look, we want the best of tech to be used, but we want to make sure that the worse or baser instincts that tech initiates. Is sort of managed, and that's what the book is about. Now, coming to values, see, there are no universal values in anything, including in technology. I think, broadly speaking, the internet of the last 20 years, there are 4 different paradigms which seem to be emerging. One is the US, which has post-2000 completely led by market forces and led to the rise of great companies, but also creating massive winner-take-all models, which is now there's some amount of reaction to that. You have the Chinese approach, which is essentially creating their own Chinese firewall, and then it's a surveillance-oriented approach, and so on.
Much more state-led.
Yeah, state-led, and there's a camera at every road junction, and people are seeing who's speeding and that kind of stuff. And then you have the European model, which is essentially regulation-oriented. So they are all about GDPR for privacy, Digital Markets Act, Digital Services Act. So they see regulation as an end in itself. I think the Indian model is very different. The Indian model is about empowerment of people. And therefore, we are very, very optimistic about technology. Just that we want this more negative aspects to be managed.
No, that's right. And I think just 5 years ago also, or 3 years ago also, I think people, at least in the global discourse, were only talking about these 3 models. The US private-led, the Chinese state-led, and the Europeans as a regulatory superpower, as some of them were calling Europe. But I think you're right that India is now starting to present that 4th model to the world, which we will come back to in the later part of our discussion. The other point around the individuals that I wanted to get your views on, and this is something that I'm actually personally very curious about. So as I was doing the research for my own book, one of the things that I came across was some psychologists who were looking at how technology is rewiring our brain. And one of the interesting ideas I came across was this idea that over the last several decades or even centuries, you can argue through the Industrial Revolution, this idea of industry line, production line, has almost made our system, our education system, our ways of thinking to be a very linear thought process driven system. So we as individuals have been trained to think linearly now. However, if you look at how the internet is structured, through this hyperlinking process where you're clicking and clicking and then going on, there's this idea that's coming out of a networked thinking approach, right? And there are both pros and cons to it, but I wanted to get your views on whether you believe that the technology, the internet and smartphone technology in particular, is rewiring how we are thinking. And this you might draw upon your experience at Infosys or otherwise also.
I'll just quickly say something and then I think we should distinguish between the pull model of the internet and the push model of the internet. The pull model of the internet is something which allows me to traverse any part of the world on the internet, which is very, very powerful using hyperlinks. I can click and go anywhere and so on. And that really exposes me to a wide variety of things. But the push model of internet, where somebody is pushing information to you, that's far more corrosive. Because as we said, since the whole thing is built on advertising, the system or the AI and all the algorithms are trying to feed you things to keep you captivated. And then they'll feed you things that you want to hear. So and then you go to a filter bubble and polarization. So I think the pull model is probably one which is much more wide-ranging, but push, the risk is that it sends you stuff you want to hear, and then you become more and more irritable.
I do think that the way we think is changing. I still remember I had this interview once where it didn't go very well because they asked me what is an idempotent matrix and what's a nilpotent matrix. I do remember now, but at that time I may have messed it up. And they use that as, oh, you don't know this much. And I said, look, I can, this is 2012. I said, look, I can pull out my phone right now and Google this in 4 seconds. The fact that you're asking me this is archaic, right? Like you don't need to ask me what I'll do with it, ask me how I'll put it to whatever. And obviously the interviewer got very miffed. And I think today, similarly, once we have these ChatGPT, we have a bunch of other tools coming in, I think the premium on certain skills keeps going down and down. I think Tarun Khanna's session, the last session yesterday, he was saying that we always think of meritocracies, right? But what is merit changes. At some point, being a good horseman was merit. At some point, being a good swordsman was merit. At some point, we became a knowledge economy, and that's a particular kind of skill or merit. How quickly we adapt, how quickly we change to this future. I think what Infosys did, and this is one of the reasons that it's now so commonplace, but we don't appreciate this, that building this talent pool, like they really sort of created a sort of an army of engineers out of India, of software, a software industry out of India, and it's really the software backend for the world now. So to your earlier question also, technology is not something that has its own destiny. I believe that was in your session that I heard. It's how we shape it, and I think what Nandan and the team that we work with largely has shown that we can shape our own destiny. We can shape both at an individual level, how we use it, what we do, but also at a collective level, how India as a country responds to this, takes charge of this opportunity. Those are options available to us, and all of us can decide how that works.
Yeah. No, let me now move to the society piece. One of the things that I tried, and I think you've both done this in your book quite well also, is try and place, and many others have now started to put the current technological revolution in a way in a slightly longer historical context. And that's one of the things I tried to do in my book as well. And one of the things that came out in my research was the impact of industrialization and the institutions that it brought about, and the societal and family level changes it brought about were very stark. So we in India, for example, very clearly can say that we've moved from a society that was, for example, joint family driven, much more spread out geographically, to now urban agglomerations, nuclear families, etc. And if that was the impact of the Industrial Revolution, Mr. Nilekani, today the tech revolution, in a way, if you look at Gen Z, but even all of us, as you walk into even the JLF, you see people talking less to each other, though I think JLF is much better than other settings I've been in recently. But people are becoming even more individualistic than what the Industrial Revolution might have caused, right? From that move from joint to nuclear, in a way we've moved to nuclear families to more individualistic families where your children are also not often talking to you at the dinner table. Is your sense that the tech revolution, and especially the smartphone, leading us into that one-way direction where we are becoming more and more individualistic? Or is it that there are other sets of technologies other than the smartphone, obviously, which is a very individualistic device, that might actually reverse a little bit of this, what I think is a dangerous direction?
No, I think people spend more and more time on the devices, and every minute they spend on the devices, they're not spending with other people. So in that extent, yes, it's becoming more and more inward in that sense. And also because of the filter bubbles, you will only be in that world which resonates with your ideology or your thinking. So I think it's definitely leading to much more polarization and tribal behavior, because it encourages you to be in your own tribe as opposed to cross. So I think those are all social consequences. But the other big thing is that all prior revolutions happened slowly, right? So it took 40 years for electricity to become widespread, or toilets, public toilets, or whatever. So each of these things take decades to work. The risk we have here is this stuff moves at hyper speed. I mean, you launch something and then within a matter of weeks or months, it's spread. So as it is, society and change happens at a glacial pace. On top of that, you have this hyper-speeded activity. So I think that makes it all the more difficult to even predict where this will land up.
The individual, yes, inward-looking also, but I feel like there is hope as well. You do find that there are people who take charge of these spaces, and they learn a lot. A classmate of mine recently became a mother, and she says that one of the big things for her has been finding this Facebook group called Mothers of 2022, right? Like, so the women who gave birth in that year act as a support system for each other. So these little small bubbles of kindness, small bubbles of sort of using the technology in a more community-oriented way exist. Except they're not mass marketable. They're not the most profitable way to use technology. And I think somebody needs to innovate and make that the frontier model of technology rather than the advertising model. And one of you could do it, honestly. I really think that's the message in the book also, that we explain how these technologies, what is actually happening underneath, which leads to these outcomes of tribal behavior, etc. Collaborative filtering, we have a whole chapter on that. But so the message of the book is you can redesign this. Anybody can. It's not something that only some wizards in Bangalore do. It's something that honestly anybody can.
Now, that's absolutely right. I think if you think about even the COVID period, which is when you were writing this book, I can tell you from personal experience as well that it was these micro communities that were enabled by messaging platforms like WhatsApp, etc., that really became the support network for literally everyone. When I think we saw institutional failure in certain pockets, it was these micro communities, again, enabled by literally actually the same technology that we are worried about, that also then provided us, I think, absolutely essential support. And that's why I think, I was having this discussion yesterday with someone, that I do believe that for all the pessimism sometimes we have about the addiction or the distraction that the smartphone might bring, the flip side is almost always equally true, that the kind of creativity, the kind of support networks that people naturally tend to build using these technologies is also, I think, something to build further upon. Let me also ask you, when we talk about society, the other concern that many people today have is this idea that we are maybe going back almost to this idea of a gilded age, which existed 100, 150 years ago, when the industrial capitalism was at its peak. And they suddenly developed this massive socio-economic divide between the haves and the have-nots. Because of concentration of wealth, then we see, back in pre-war, World War I, Europe, and then subsequently during the World Wars. In fact, Toby Walsh yesterday, during our panel, spoke about this also. Do we expect that the kind of inequality that these models, the business models that we've seen at least in the last decade or two, which leads to concentration of wealth and winner-take-all models, are you worried about that from a societal standpoint? And if so, what is it that now, as a society, as a people, our response to that should be? Is it more a welfare state, labor-driven movement, or are we going to have to come up with other ways to manage this kind of divide?
No, I think because of essentially the concentrating nature of technology, which network effects, essentially you inevitably, if you don't think it through, you have winner-take-all models. And when you have winner-take-all models, two things happen. One is there's massive wealth concentration in the winners. And the second is that part of winner-take-all models is extreme automation and eliminating jobs and so on. And therefore, it also creates low incomes and declining jobs in the middle class, which is what has happened elsewhere. But in fact, we think that the answer to that is, of course, there are answers of creating a welfare state and so on. But actually, it's also if the technology is well deployed. And that's where, if you look at the India stack, and the whole approach in India is how do we re-architect this technology to create a more equitable, more universal, more inclusive, more egalitarian society. And therefore, there's a deep philosophy here that if you want to make it truly inclusive, and we have done that in India, and we will do that in India, and I can explain more of that. So absolutely, the fundamental driving principle of what we do in India is to counter the winner-take-all nature of the internet.
I think in other contexts, Nandan gave this framing that I really like, is that the US went from these mom-and-pop stores to sort of large format retails to like big box retail like your Walmart, etc. And then when Amazon came in, they basically were like big box or big malls online. And the everything store, and everything is available, and one place where you get everything. And I think the prevalent models of the internet, or things that happen on the internet, business that happen on the internet, are always like that. We own everything, we are catering to everything. Whereas what we really need, and for a country like India, is to go back to that bazaar model, the local sort of, local kind of commerce, local kind of media, in a small network, like one person influencer having like 10 million followers is, I think, pointless, right? Like the only thing they'll produce then is the lowest common denominator, which really enriches nobody, but there's a lot of lip syncing and dancing, right, on those reels. But what you really need is like smaller, like the internet is very good at communicating people based on interest rather than geography, which is how history has been organized, what is local. But to you, local could mean like authors and readers could be a community connected across the internet, etc. So I really like that. I think that that's where India is building for, and we're building those bazaars and we're building those things online. Again, it's up to each of us to vote with our wallets, with our feet, with our attention. Which one do you prefer? Are you going to go to like the big box retail of the world, or are you looking at the kind of ONDC sort of models that we are building here?
Tanuj, you're forgetting that if you want to sell your book, you need the influencers. So
I have nothing against them.
But anyway, so I think the piece that I now want to move on to, and I think Mr. Nilekani, you were starting to allude to the India stack. And so now I want to move to the tech and nation piece of our conversation. As a nation, but before I come to the India stack, I want to ask you a question which has been playing on my mind. As a nation, and as someone who's been on the tech entrepreneurship and VC side, but also, at least over the last few years, has been seeing very closely the tech policy development in Delhi. And I say Delhi for a reason to provoke you to say that maybe it should not only be Delhi. But I see a paradox in India, and maybe some of you might share this. On one hand, we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years an incredible adoption of digital technology. It's an absolute revelation. Like the last 10 years, the smartphone market, the digital revolution enabled by UPI, but also by the startup ecosystem, has seen massive, massive adoption. So you would think that India is an amazing tech adopter nation today. But on the other hand, paradoxically, I can also come back and tell you that in 2015, when drones and drone startups were starting to really pick up, our first reaction as a country was, let's ban them on national security considerations. You look at biotech, we have very, very strong restrictions on genetic research, which is an emerging area of innovation globally. You look at AI, the conversation yesterday for some of you who might have been there, was a lot around what are we supposed to be afraid of, right? So we have these paradoxical, almost in our heads, views to technology. So I want to get your views on this. How does India, given, I've talked about the great tech game in my book, and I believe that India's got to win this time. We cannot lose like we've lost the industrial game and so on and so forth. What does India need to change in its attitudes towards technology that you feel that we are maybe not getting right?
No, I don't think it's about attitudes. I think it's about how innovation spreads. There's a type of innovation which we can call as permissionless innovation, where you don't ask anybody's permission and it quickly rolls out. And then there is permissioned innovation. So a lot of the digital infrastructure is permissionless, right? I mean, smartphones are going, some app is downloaded, nobody asks any permission. And that has both very massive diffusion as well as some negative consequences. Whereas permissioned innovation is where there's a regulatory process to we ask whether it's to make genetic food, genetically modified food, or whether it's to use drones for security. So I think invariably when it's permissionless, diffusion of innovation happens very fast. If it's permission, then obviously governments and regulators get involved. So I don't see it as an attitude problem, just the nature of that innovation. And digital innovation has tended to be permissionless.
So drones is a very personal subject for me. I'll just keep this short.
Your bio mentioned drones. So
no, I was part of I started a company in 2013-14 which used to fly drones. The government banned it when Amazon announced that they're going to be flying drones in India. And then since then I actually ended up here in the tech policy space and then working with Nandan, and now we're here. But a simple thing is that I think this is not a technology question, it's a political and sort of generally a state of our society question, because we're still not yet a rule of law country really, right? People, all of us traffic outside, we know that if there is there's a U-turn and you have to go a little further away in Noida and Delhi, this, that people will drive on the wrong side of the road, right? Like it really doesn't matter. So I guess if your job is to be responsible for safety, I think then the response to a society like that is to over-regulate. And I've seen it. I saw myself, Sahara Star in Bombay, where I'm from, there was weddings, right? And this is literally at the airport, right? But even here, people will fly drones upstairs at the wedding, and they're like, chalta hai, or they'll bribe a cop or something. So
The permissionless innovation.
yeah, so permissionless innovation also. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like you say my school teacher is shouting at me a lot, or like is doing something or whatever. And the question to ask is, but have you been behaving as well, right? Have you been maintaining decorum in that space? And I do believe that it's a interactive thing, and we also need to sort of start thinking about more broadly about how India becomes a rule of law society for us to start then enjoying this sort of freedoms, I guess.
So we'll open it up to the audience in just a couple of minutes. But before we do that, I cannot actually do justice to this conversation without actually getting Mr. Nilekani's views on the India stack story. The India stack story, for those of you who are not familiar, obviously started off with UPI and Aadhaar, but is now getting extended to various other sectors. And so, Mr. Nilekani, if we can just take 2 or 3 minutes to talk about where it's headed, and how you feel that can enable a next sort of 2-3 decades of innovation in India.
Yeah, I think we are roughly halfway on the journey of India's digital transformation, and as you said, it began with Aadhaar, which I was the founding chairman of Aadhaar in 2009, and today 1.3 billion people have a digital ID Aadhaar, and they use it 80 million times a day, so it's ubiquitous in its consumption. Then UPI was designed by NPCI, which is where I'm an advisor, and that does about 7.8 billion transactions a month, and about 260 million Indians use it. And there are about 50 to 60 million merchant points where you can make a UPI payment with a QR code. And then along with Aadhaar, we also did DBT, which now India runs the world's largest direct benefit transfer program. Digital signatures, DigiLocker, which the government has built. 140 million Indians store their Aadhaar details or their vaccination certificates there. So this is all already there, and it's working at scale. I think there are 3 big revolutions that are yet to happen. First is the account aggregator ecosystem, where India will be the first country where data will be empowered, people will be empowered with their own data. So unlike the winner-take-all model where data concentrates in companies or governments, in the Indian model, the data is distributed and is with the empowerment of each person. So a small business tomorrow can get a loan using his digital footprint. And this is extremely democratizing. So credit, for example, will get democratized. It's part of building an equitable society. The second thing is ONDC, which will allow you to disaggregate commerce. It makes commerce more inclusive. Every small retailer or supplier can join the network, and commerce will become. And the third is the revolution in logistics. As India builds a much better logistics, better airports, ports, better digital connections, a common GST, FASTag on the roads, the logistics will become cheaper. So commerce, logistics, and lending will become dramatically different. And then there's the whole AI layer on top of all this, which I think will allow much better access to services for everybody in their own language. So broadly, this is where we are, and this is where we're going.
And if I think that does deserve an applause, because I think that it has fundamentally rethought how our digital relationships with firms and governments will be. And I think that this has been no easy task, and I think we must applaud folks both in the private sector, in Bangalore, Delhi. A lot of people have been behind this. And obviously with the guidance of and vision that you've unleashed with the Aadhaar over a decade ago. And I would encourage entrepreneurs in the audience to think hard about how to use this infrastructure layer that's getting built to build innovative apps on top. Because I think that will also then become a source of wealth creation. We've done the infrastructure piece. The roads have been built, I think, in a very fair, equitable manner now. And now it's up to, I think, India's entrepreneurs to create wealth on top of that through innovation. So with that, let me open it up for questions. I'll start off with the woman here, with the lady here in the pink cap. Then I'll come to you, sir. And please keep your questions extremely succinct.
Sir, my name is Dr. Komal. I'm an author on the book on electoral reforms. My question and suggestion is to Nilekani, sir. So in this era of digitization, why is e-voting so less prominent in India when Aadhaar and everything is so personalized and individualistic? Why is only a very less strata of our population allowed to e-vote? Are there plans for this in future? Because major part of our literate population does not even go to vote. On the other hand, if it's allowed for them to e-vote, voting ratios are going to increase? Thank you.
Great question.
Well, I think certainly the technology for electronic voting is not such a big deal. When it will happen is a decision that the Election Commission has to take. But let me add one caveat on e-voting, which is the nature of voting has to be anonymity. You know, when you cast your vote, that has to be your personal decision, and that should be done, and there should be no way that somebody can find out whom you cast your vote for, because there could be potential retaliation and so on. And therefore, the risk of e-voting is that if then digitally people are able to find out whom you voted for, that's not a good thing to have. So best thing would probably be to use technology to ensure that everybody gets to vote, maybe comes to the voting booth. If you migrate, your vote, vote is transferred easily. But the final act of deciding who you vote for should be kept completely private.
So,
Hi. So first of all, it's a beautiful book. Everybody should read. I read it some time ago. So Nandan, you have advocated heavily about digital for public good in this book, and today India is a country of entrepreneurs, where entrepreneurs are trying to do a lot of things. And every time an entrepreneur starts a venture, they go to VCs for money, and VCs are always looking for valuation. How do you think the ventures the startup entrepreneurs can build technologies for digital for public good, which are accepted and valued by the VCs, and ultimately those are seen valuable businesses?
No, I think there is entrepreneurs' innovation on one side and digital public goods on the other are very complementary, because the digital rails that we lay actually enable entrepreneurs to create scalable businesses. I'll just give you 2-3 examples. Aadhaar allowed the entire, there's something called Aadhaar KYC, which allows you to open a bank account in 2 minutes or get a mobile connection in 2 minutes. And Aadhaar KYC was one of the principal reasons why Reliance Jio was able to get to 100 million customers in 6 months, because they could do 1 million customers a day using Aadhaar KYC and issue SIM cards, which they could not do in a paper-based world. The same KYC was used by Zerodha to build a huge stockbroking operation. The same KYC is used by Paytm Payments Bank. So it actually enabled newcomers to innovate in many areas. The second example is what happened with UPI payments. UPI payments allowed people like PhonePe and Google Pay and Paytm and Amazon Pay and all to build payment capabilities on top of UPI. And that has created billions of dollars of valuation. Recently, as you know, PhonePe raised some money at a $12 billion valuation. So fundamentally, once you create digital rails at population scale, which is inclusive, then innovators can build on top of that. So that's what is happening, and even in e-commerce, it will happen with the new changes. With account aggregator, you're going to have a new class of lending organization that will lend digitally to millions of small people. So each of these changes also brings in massive innovation from entrepreneurs.
no, absolutely. I think the way Android OS and Apple OS, iOS, were the layers on which innovative apps got built. I think you can think of this, the Aadhaar and the India Stack, as that digital OS upon which entrepreneurs can build amazing innovations. To the lady with the orange scarf, I believe. You, ma'am? Yes. And then I'll come to the gentleman in the back. And if you can all raise your hands very quickly so I can take a look.
Thanks for that very exciting conversation. Clearly, digital transformation has affected various things we do, and digital rails have been laid. My question is, with all the data out there now, and there's a data privacy and security bill out there, how do we, and when you're using this for public good as well as some of the perils that you've outlined in your book, how does one think about data privacy and security issue? And I know the bill is out there to get feedback, but there are both sides to how this data is handled. And just another quick follow-up, as medical doctors, they take the hypocritical oath of following certain tenets, similar with lawyers. As digital professionals, we are free for all, and that's maybe driven some of the innovation. But how do we sort of manage the responsibility, particularly where data is concerned?
No, I think definitely the data privacy law is very much required. And as you know, there was a a law which had gone through a lot of amendments, and the government took the right decision to withdraw that and put out a much more conceptually structured law, which is now there, and hopefully it will get passed in the coming months. But it's important to know that all these individual building blocks that have been created have actually got privacy embedded in them. I mean, the Aadhaar is ruled by the Aadhaar Act, which has very clear rules about what you can or cannot do with that data. The banking applications come under the Banking Regulations Act and the Payment and Settlement Act. So while there is no one law, there is in each sector, there are laws on how the data should be used. So in fact, the biggest challenge is in consumer apps where there are no laws. So I think hopefully there will be something with the law coming.
The gentleman in the back with the red cap.
So you guys talked about living with the technology, you know, how overuse should be avoided. So my question is, do you guys think that this overuse or concern you guys talked about, and anyone can answer, technology would find the solution for it? For example, you know, you guys talked about WhatsApp, Facebook. So the interaction was, you know, the person, you could not talk to the person. Now you have these new set of apps like Clubhouse, Spaces, wherein you are interacting. So in that sense, I'm asking.
That's a good question. I do believe that the technologies we use every day will change, whether out of frustration, whether somebody invents something better. That keeps changing also because, you know, we also get bored, like novelty is a factor. Can we solve it? I think the trap, and Anirudh asked us, are you techno-optimist, are you techno-realist, etc. To believe that there will be a new killer app that will solve this problem is also, I think, a little bit of a stretch, which is why in the book, you know, we give very real sort of ideas of how to manage this. And some of the changes technology, some of the changes, you know, turning off your notifications, etc. We give practical advice. But some of the changes mindset. What am I really getting out of it? Like, you know, to actually pause and ask that question. Why am I doing this? Am I doing this as a reaction because I'm bored or I have 5 minutes to kill, or, you know, am I anxious about something else? There's a lot of introspection also, which is in the book. And to the previous question, you know, privacy is this large looming threat. What if you really want to take action about it? You have to ask privacy from what, right? Are you trying to protect yourself from certain sensitive information leaking to somebody not eavesdropping? And for each of those, we outline certain practical steps. In a large sense, you're always at threat because all your data is somewhere and somebody can attack that company, which you can do nothing about. But how can you manage your own personal data and your interactions to manage privacy is all in the book.
So, you know, blockchain and Web3 in a way was trying to also, as a technology, offer solution to the problems created by Web 2. So in a way, yes, you can argue that technology might again offer a solution to the problems that it has own created, but I think even if you look at climate tech, and this is my pet peeve, we cannot expect technology to solve our climate problem. But to Tanuj's point, it'll have to be behavioral change, mindset change combined with technology innovation that'll help us solve. To the lady there. I like your strategy of just keeping your hand up throughout. So we shall reward you.
You're rewarding persistence.
That's right.
Hi, my name is Ina Kapoor. One point that we didn't touch is the role of marketing, especially digital marketing. As an hopefully ex-marketer, digital marketing is about showing an ad so many times to the consumer that the consumer gets fed up till he or she buys. So one, at what point does the onus lie on the marketers or the companies to call quits on that customer? Because even if you close the ad, they still keep showing you the ad. Two, should someone step in at some point, regulatory body, because that causes a lot of anxiety and issues with customers, I think.
So we have a little bit of a section on how ads work and this there. Is there a responsible behavior that we need to take? I think the answer there is going to be more economical. What is happening today is that Google and Facebook, if you look at the ad market, right, and they say there are infinite ads for each eyeball, some ad or whatever, but that's not really true. What's actually happening is that because of the auction and the bidding system that they have, it's becoming more and more unfeasible to actually get a customer. It's reaching a point where people are realizing, you know what, why am I spending 150 rupees to get somebody to look at an ad which they won't even click and they won't do this? Whereas if I come to a JLF or something and, you know, I can engage with audiences better. So the current ad industry is writing its own demise story in that sense, that they're making it more and more expensive to even make it effective. And digital marketers, I think, you know, this influencer marketing, etc. I see it getting a little more and more like, you know, it's not a trust relationship anymore. Ads are not labeled as ads. Influencers will pretend that they are using something when they are not. And I think, you know, people are not dumb. Like, they will figure it out and move on. So we're writing our own demise story in advertising. Regulations is a tricky double-edged sword because, you know, I mean, I'm just going to say that. I don't think the reasons are obvious unless none.
Yeah. No, so thank you. I think for the paucity of time, we'll have to stop here, unfortunately. But let me first thank both Mr. Nilekani and Tanuj for an excellent session. Please buy the book. I think it's an amazing book, would give you a lot of tactical advice also. But let me also end with just one thing for everyone, that we have to be a lot more thoughtful or bitful in the design and use of our technology. If there was one key takeaway, I would share that. And with that, I think I'll hand it back to you.
I thank all three of you for this absolutely riveting and such an important and relevant discussion that I think all of us can relate to on some level. As a token of our appreciation, please accept these scars from us. If you guys have more questions, you can chat.